Hey, how's it going? I hope you're doing well today. Today's video is, it's a new spot, and I thought we'd try something new. I've got a Perry Rhodan book here, which my grandfather just gave to me. He's downsizing, so he gave me a lot of stuff, and he collected these Perry Rhodan books, which I believe were German, made in Germany, like created in German, and then later translated into English. But he collected them, and he gave me this cooler, like a food cooler, full of them, like hundreds of books. And I mean, they're not huge, but like they add up quite a bit. And they are a science fiction space travel book series. I'm only on I just finished chapter 2, but I'm really hoping that I can get into it, because I have so many of them now that it would be nice. It'd be nice to read, because y'all probably know books are expensive. So, I mean, if I really enjoyed them and I could read all like 100 volumes, that'd be pretty nice. But I'm at least going to get through the first 3, see what I think, and go from there. But I thought that I could read a little bit with you. I haven't actually ever read a real like space science fiction book before. This is the first one I've ever tried, and it's cool so far. Like I said, I'm only on the beginning of chapter 3, which is where we're going to start today. But it's interesting. So this one, it starts off with 4 astronauts on a rocket ship being sent into space, and we are just starting off when they're, I think, the second phase or the third phase or something, when the rocket breaks apart and then shoots up. But I'm just using a ruler for my bookmark, but excuse my pronunciation or bad reading. I also really wanted to get better at just reading out loud, so I thought this one might be a nice way to practice that. So I do apologize if the first video is not the best, but I do hope you enjoy, and let me know what you think of this book. I'm curious, because I'm also curious how I feel about it. So we'll get right into it. Chapter 3. This time, even Perry Rhodan had been cautious. See what I mean? I'm not good. I don't know why I second guess myself. I think that's the problem. This time, even Perry Rhodan had been cautious. The counter thrust applied throughout the braking maneuver had momentarily increased G pressures to an unnerving degree. The Stardust had fallen into orbit around the moon with a speed of approximately 2 miles per second. Only then had he given the order to put on spacesuits. I feel like I should have chosen a book with like simpler words to start off with, but let's just get into it. The men had carried out his instructions without comment. While the Stardust was being drawn into ever-rowing orbits around Luna in obedience to the space station's computerized remote control guidance system, they had donned the ultra-modern protective suits. These garments were relatively light and yet quite monstrous looking, being fully pressurized and hermetically sealed, each with its own power pack, air conditioning, oxygen supply, and so on. The transparent helmets were also bulletproof, made from the artificial alloy as hard as steel. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like sometimes when I read books out loud, I focus too much on how I'm saying it and less on the book. So, I don't know, it's weird. Next, Rhodan had insisted that they close their helmets. Only the valves on either side remained open, so that the men could still breathe the usual air of the cabin. The built-in aerostat would automatically seal the valves in an instant, should pressure drop below normal. Thus had Rhodan done all he could to reduce to a minimum the chances of an accident. The Stardust was flying with stern forward, permitting the jets to bring their thrust against their direction of flight. The Stardust is the name of the ship. The trajectory of orbit was from pole to pole. Consequently, when the ship sank beyond the line of sight in its path across the other side of the moon, it disappeared from within range of remote control, since radio signals from the ground stations on Earth could no longer reach the Stardust. Once the ship was within the shadow of the moon, therefore, the autopilot on board the rocket assumed control of their flight, which would lead, after a fifth ellipse, to a landing on the lunar surface. See, I don't know about you, but when I'm reading this book, it's almost like they use too many big words, and I just kind of get lost being like, wait, what? What's happening? But I do like the idea, so I'm sorry I'm cutting in and out so much. We'll get better as it goes on. I'm probably. The braking process continued as the fifth orbit began. On the visible face of Earth's only satellite, the sun had risen on one of the long lunar days. 6% of the opposite hemisphere already lay in the deepest darkness. Only on the radar screen could a clear picture of the torn surface be obtained. The dark side of the moon was in all ways indistinguishable from the familiar bright side. But this had long been known. The moon held no more mystery in that respect. Once again they emerged from the cone of darkness in the wake of the moon. Their altitude was approximately 55 miles, their velocity reduced by brief braking counterthrusts to a speed of 1.4 miles per second. The autopilot announced with a shrill whistle that the powerful directional beam from the space station had locked onto the ship again, and the central computers aboard the Stardust received new instructions in the form of the latest calculations. The rocket was visible on the screen as a green dot, floating along one of the prescribed lines representing the landing orbit. The end of this line was close to the lunar south pole, just beyond the Newcomb crater. I don't know. A red circle indicated the landing site, a flat, apparently rock-strewn surface that offered the safest place to set down the rocket. The crew could hear the voice of the project chief as clearly as they could hear the autopilot registering the guidance impulses. There were short intervals between the reports, for ultra waves, though traveling at a speed of light, still needed some time to span the tremendous distance. Still flying at relatively high speed, the Stardust arrived above the western shore of the Mare Nubium. Immediately ahead, the Big Walter crater appeared. It was not very far from the landing site. Ground control, General Pounder speaking. The voice came over the loudspeaker amid the crackling of static. You will reach the turning point in 72 seconds. We will time the impulse, taking into consideration the distance the radio waves will have to cover. We're switching off. In the meantime, in order to avoid any disturbances, we have you clear on our radar screens. Reception is very good, hardly any interference. Primary remote control, autopilot starting operations. We'll set you down safely. Begin release of your landing supports. Contact me immediately upon landing. Until you touch down on the moon, we wish you all the luck. See, I find I'm not as into it when I read out loud. But Maybe that's just because I'm reading slower. I mean, I'm a pretty slow reader to begin with, but I feel like when you read aloud, you're automatically reading slower too. Rhodan pulled a lever. The four telescoping landing supports of the Stardust thrust out, moving away from the ship's hull at an angle of 45 degrees. The hydraulic system extended the long tubular structures farther and farther outward. At the outermost end of each, there unfolded a flat contact disc with a surface area of 4 square yards. When the critical point in orbit had been reached, the Stardust was still on the flight line. They had compensated for even the smallest deviation in course. Everything ready? Bell's voice sounded strained. Contact, forward. He could hear the heavy breathing of the other men. Almost everything hinged on this moment, when their future hung in the balance. How long are the chapters? I don't think they're very long. Yeah. Only a couple pages. Suddenly, without prior warning, a sound shrieked out of the autopilot monitor. The impulse had arrived, punctual to a split second. You gotta let me know how you feel about this setup and reading in general, because it's very different than what I'm used to. And even my camera, I'm using my like good phone to record, and my other phone is connected to my microphone, so hopefully everything works out and sounds okay. But I don't know, it's just kind of nice, kind of a different. I know all my videos are usually so dark, but I'm in my little comfy lounge chair, got my blanket, and I'm just enjoying myself. So I hope that it's enjoyable for you too. Where were we? The engines roared in a brief but violent counterthrust that decreased the remaining speed of the ship by another 50%. This subjected the men to a force of 12 Gs. When this had passed, an interval of the correction of previous calculations took place. Lungs heaving, they began to breathe again. At the next braking thrust would come to the 60-degree rotation in orbit. Then the retro rockets would have to be positioned exactly perpendicular to the lunar surface. Following these operations, the ship would hover above the point of landing and descend on its own exhaust with a speed of 12 feet per second. Lightning quick, the various data raced through Rhodan's head. All that sounded so simple, so infallible. But now that he lay in the fragile structure, his mind seized the problems and perils with utmost piercing clarity. The Stardust began its descent in a flat parabola. When the gravitational pull of the moon had grown strongly apparent, it was high time for the turnabout maneuver, when the jets of the combustion chamber would have to be turned from their horizontal position and aimed at the ground. 3 seconds to go, called Bell in a choked voice. 2, 1, contact. Contact followed. With it came such an incredible screeching and howling that it seemed as though a 1,000 kilowatt broadcast station were standing beside the rocket, beaming its full energy directly at them. The sounds broke out of the control loudspeakers in a veritable flood. Deafening noise and ultrasonic whistling assaulted the ears of the startled men. For a fraction of a second, Reginald Bell looked totally devoid of sensibility. His broad face contorted in a grimace full of pain and panic. Rhodan had stopped short, completely immobile. When he had overcome his initial surprise, however, he reacted with astonishing swiftness. His right hand slammed down on the emergency lever. Magnetic straps closed shut to imprison the men in their seats. Oh. I just cracked the book open. What? Well, oops. We'll just pretend that didn't happen. could avoid hearing the shrill warning signal from the autopilot. The Stardust electronic brain reported the disturbance. Flickering lamps gave proof that the impulse they had expected for the turnabout maneuver had not got through to them from the ground station. Even though the computer was denied the power of independent judgment, it had stated with instantaneous reckoning that this was cause for utmost alarm. I can't believe I did that. That's so bad. I mean, it's just old glue and, what can you do? The diagrams were already lit up, having appeared automatically and without error. Reg glanced at them. "Deviation," he shouted, with a stampede of feelings. "No ignition impulse. We're falling beyond the landing site. Interference is preventing reception of the remote control signals. Where are these things coming from? They're only on our frequency, Perry." Perry? Perry the Platypus. Every time I read that name, that's what I think. Perry the Platypus. I used to love that show. Rhodan abandoned any lengthy reflection. The surface of the moon, brightly illuminated by the rising sun, sped toward them. He did whatever a commander could in such an instance. With breathtaking speed, in an automatic reflex, he switched off the main circuit built into the armrest. The Stardust was thus beyond the range of the earthbound remote control system. An infernal caterwall of the control instruments was cut off instantly, as if it had never existed. A bell began to ring, and then a voice boomed through the cabin. It was the autopilot, speaking with a soulless voice, pre-recorded on tape. "Central computer directing autopilot landing. Calculations are in progress. Completion. Landing initiated. Emergency signal QQRXQ has been sent with maximum intensity via channel 16. Landing proceeding." This was the message some technician had recorded on tape before the blast-off. He had neglected to mention that these cheerful plans for landing starkly ignored all safety measures. Bringing the helpless ship down at all costs, regardless of consequences, was nothing short of an act of desperation. An impromptu resumption of the flight at this stage was impossible. The ground was nearly too near. The velocity of fall had increased to more than 1.2 miles per second, and the necessary rotation would take too long. It was an emergency. It made no difference whether, under the flame fountains of the Stardust exhaust, there lay the charity of a flat plain or the cruel promise of a crater with its razor-edged eggshell jaws. The engine howled. The rocket was violently whipped about by the realigned steering jets and brought abruptly into the vertical position. It fell with its face heavenward, its sharp nose pointed now to the dark and star-laden sky. Whining gyros took over the stabilizing maneuvers. Someone shouted, "No one knew who knew. No one who knew. No one knew who knew. No one knew who." What? Why did that take me so long to... Okay, never mind. Rhodan no longer gave commands or issued instructions. It would have been senseless. There was nothing anyone could do, for the necessary calculations and manipulations could be executed only by the computers. In such circumstances, a human brain was condemned to failure. The men's eyes were fixed on the video screens. The exterior observation cameras disclosed the jagged walls of a crater. They were blinded by the most intense white heat below them, wherein was concentrated all the force and fury of the rocket's thrust. Bell shouted something in the nature of a helpless croak. With the pressure of 16 Gs, it was remarkable that he could still squeeze anything out of his throat. Next they heard a roar and muffled explosions. Another jolt pressed them back into their couches. Several fittings broke loose with a loud clatter as the hull seemed to split in two. There followed immediately afterward a period of rattling and vibration. Yet before they ceased entirely, there suddenly came utter calm. A green lamp grew bright above Perry Rhodan. It no longer flickered, but shone steadily. The absolute silence was torn by shrill, hysterical laughter. "Captain Fletcher!" Rhodan's voice, though not loud, was as sharp as a knife. The cackling broke off with a piercing and unpleasant whine. When Fletcher had again lapsed into silence, the hard lines in Rhodan's face relaxed. A mild expression appeared in the bright eyes of the ship's commander. "Easy, Fletch. It's all right." His gaze fell once again upon the green lamp, whose light was so infinitely reassuring. Thus did the central autopilot computer give its wordless report. The rocket now stood on the surface, apparently hardly damaged. Bell displayed a breathless grin. His reason seemed still unwilling to accept the facts for what they were. Dr. Manoli remained silent as usual. In his pale face, only the coal-black eyes seemed alive, and they held a question. In a moment, Perry Rhodan would deal the men a traumatic blow. They naturally expected some remarks from him regarding the successful emergency landing, some sign that all was once again well. They waited for something, even if it was only a short sigh of relief after the agonizing ordeal of the last few minutes. But Perry Rhodan reacted differently. "Fletch, you'll have to determine the location and nature of this jamming station at once. You'll find the data on the magnetic tapes of the computer. Let's see how good a mathematician you are." He had nothing more to add. So, that was chapter 3. I don't know what I think yet. I appreciate when authors use a lot of words to kind of bring the story to life, and I think that they did that well here because it really makes you feel the science of it. But I don't know. I'm still not fully convinced. So we'll have to wait and see if I like it more in the future. This might be loud, so I'm not going to talk while I show you, but this is what the cover looks like. Perry Rhodan. I guess it's just called number 1, Enterprise Stardust. And back we go. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I enjoy it. I like it so far. I'm just curious to see where it goes. But thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate you being here. I hope you're doing well and taking care of yourself. And if you got this far, let me know what you thought of the video, of the setup, the layout. I don't know, it's a nice change. I think I'll definitely be going back and forth from this and the closet that we sit in. So yeah, I guess that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.